The engine produced around 130 horsepower, as much as a medium-sized car with an engine 4 or 5 times the size. Why does the 500cc racing motorcycle engine produce so much power? First, because it's a 2-stroke. Most big engine motorcycles and all cars are 4-strokes. This is a section through one cylinder of a typical 4-stroke, simplified and slowed right down so you can see what's happening. The 4 strokes, movements up or down of the piston, are induction, when the gasoline-air mixture is drawn in, compression, as the piston moves up, compressing the fuel-air mix, power, the spark plug ignites the mixture, which explodes, forcing the piston down again. Lastly, exhaust, as the piston goes up again and pushes the spent gases out. Therefore, 1 stroke in 4 produces power. By contrast, a 2-stroke, seen here in simplified form, produces power every time the piston comes up. As the piston moves up, it uncovers the inlet port and the natural vacuum draws the mixture in. The rising piston compresses the mixture, ready for ignition. The explosion drives the piston down, giving power and forcing the new mixture round towards the transfer port. The burnt gases can now escape through the open exhaust port. The piston will rise again to compress the mixture and begin the cycle once more. Power on every other stroke. Unlike cars or 4-stroke engines, 2-strokes need oil mixed in with the gasoline for lubrication. In a road engine, about 30% of the mixture is oil. In a racing engine, only about 5% is oil. And under racing conditions, a typical 500cc bike will do about 20 miles per gallon. Racing 2-strokes are water-cooled. It's the only way to keep an even temperature in the engine, where the exhaust gas may reach 1,300 degrees. The exhaust system is a critical part of the 2-stroke engine design. On the 3-cylinder Honda, the pipes were in the usual position, swept up below the fuel tank. On the later 4-cylinder, to improve the weight distribution, the fuel tank was put under and around the engine. You can imagine the insulation problems. This is the only time this tank position has been successful for many years, but it meant rerouting the exhaust pipes up where the fuel tank usually is, over the engine, and under the seat at the back. The design and construction of the exhaust pipes is an art in itself, because their exact length and shape controls the speed at which the burnt gas leaves the engine. Slow it down, and you lose power. With your engine turning out all that power, and the frame letting you get it onto the road, it's all useless if the tires can't handle it. And racing bikes spend most of their time with the power full on. But the developments in wheels and tires have been as great as in any other area. The older bikes naturally had spoked wheels, like the bicycles they were derived from. They had narrow rims and generally were about 20 inches in diameter, and the tires had a full tread pattern. To handle the power of modern racing engines and brakes, wheels and tires have got wider and wider. We've probably now reached the limit to tire width, because anything heavier would make the bikes hard to steer and control. In many cases, the wheels are alloy castings, but on Honda's NS500 World Championship bike, they were made of carbon fiber. To keep the bike low and reduce weight, the wheels have become smaller. The front one's now down to 15 inches. The tires have no tread for dry weather racing. You only need a pattern tread in the wet to stop the wheel aquaplaning, floating on the layer of water between the tire and the road. Dry weather tires, having no tread, they have more rubber in contact with the road and can transmit more power. And these tires need to be strong. Ordinary road tires, subjected to this power and centrifugal force, would simply throw off their treads. Another difference about race tires: they don't work properly until they're warm, so the temperatures have to be checked very carefully to make sure the rubber is at the right temperature when it's at its most sticky, before the rider can really hang it out. And race tires have a short life. Just a little bit longer than the race is all they're designed for. Many of the earliest racing machines had brake blocks similar to that of a bicycle on both front and rear. Later, racing bikes used to have drum brakes just like cars. By the 1930s, drum brakes were standard. The drums got bigger over the years and sprouted ducts and fins to carry air to them in an attempt to get rid of the heat, which makes brakes inefficient. It wasn't until the 1970s that racing motorcycles turned to disc brakes. The great advantage of the disc is that it's out in the air and stays much cooler. Even the discs are bigger than they used to be, and at the front there's one on each side of the wheel. Many different materials have been tried for the discs. Alloy for lightness, cast iron for rigidity, steel for strength. On Honda's championship bike, even carbon fiber for the rear brake. Rear brakes aren't so important, as you can see from their smaller size. The biggest visible difference between today's racing bikes and those of previous times is that the old ones ignored aerodynamics. Right up till the 50s, a racing motorcycle was about as aerodynamic as a house brick. In the late 50s, fairings began to appear. The early ones covered the front wheels, but this created so much side area that the bikes were very dangerous in a crosswind. The rules were changed, so that the front wheel had to be out in the open. Today, the racing rules still don't allow the front wheel to be covered, or the back half of the rear wheel, but designers still make every effort to reduce drag. And this is important, not just to make your bike as fast as it can be, but also so that you can leave the smallest hole in the air behind you. One of the ways you can get past the other guy is by getting a kind of tow. The front bike punches a hole in the air. This means the air resistance behind it is lower. If the guy behind is in the right place, he can get into this hole and get sucked along actually faster than his bike's maximum speed. Brake just that little bit later than the rider in front of you. Even 3 or 4 feet will do it, and you're past. Outbraking the other guy, even when you haven't been slipstreaming him, is one of the key ways you get past. It's a matter of nerve and skill who can leave it latest, because the last one to brake will be into and out of the corner first. This late braking calls for very fine judgment of speed and distance.
Because of the speeds, the depth perception is very important. You'll see a lot of people, they can go fast, but they can't go that extra second or 2 seconds. And I think that's what is that difference, is the quickness, reflexes, and depth perception, being able to go into the turn at the last possible moment and get on the brakes and be able to hit the exact line that you have to, exact point in the turn to get your maximum exit speed and not give up in any area.
The line you take around the corners is critical. You try to straighten them out as much as possible. Here, Freddie starts wide, then moves tight into the apex to get the bike straight and the power full on as soon as possible, using the whole width of the road to do it. But if you do that at a tight turn, you leave a lot of space for the other guy to get inside you, and the inside man has the advantage because he has a shorter distance to go round the corner. This is why Randy Momola here takes a tight approach, leaving no room for Kenny Roberts to get inside him. From the earliest days, racing motorcyclists remained more or less rigid on the bike, staying firmly in the saddle on corners. They did this right up to the early 70s. But then, as the tires grew wider and able to transmit more power, it became important to keep the bike as upright as possible when leaving corners. So riders developed the technique of hanging over the side and letting one knee go right down to the track. This style of riding is used by every top rider today. As you approach the corner, you're tucked down for the least air resistance and maximum speed. Coming up to the corner, the first thing you have to do is brake. And as you straighten up in the saddle, the rider's body itself becomes an air brake. Now your right hand is on the brake, but you're already sliding across the saddle, your knee out, ready to hang down in the actual turn. And of course, as you approach the corner, you're shifting down through the gears too.